Welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures, the show you never knew you needed and still don't want anyways. I'm Christopher Alexander, your blockchain and advocacy communications expert.
And I'm Justin Wallen, your guide through the often murky world of politics and polling.
Every week, we dive into the intersection of crypto, policy, and politics without taking sides. We're here to give you the straight, data-driven analysis that influences the decisions of those who want to win or want to be elected.
Think of it as a late 80s newscast, but with a twist. We bring you the serious stuff with a dash of sardonic wit and just a hint of irreverence.
So whether you're a crypto enthusiast, a policy wonk, or just someone who appreciates a data-driven approach, this is your place.
We bring you both sides, weigh the impact on crypto, and then we share what we use for show prep every week on our media.
So remember, no one is as smart as someone who agrees with you. And now get ready to enter the no swamp zone. All right, so welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures. My cat is supervising, and we have the kind of election Ken extravaganza. Ken Cuccinelli has been nice enough to join us, former Virginia Attorney General. By the way, Ken, almost 50% of us voted for you to be governor in that election.
Almost, yeah.
And I actually only say that because, A, I think I voted. And if I did, I was going to vote for you. I may have been out of the country and was really not interested in ballots. And Justin was never been a Virginia resident. So,
that's sad.
Well, okay, that's actually not true. I did live in Falls Church, Virginia, as a child.
That's a lot like Virginia.
Yeah, it's similar.
Yeah, for people viewing, it's a little communist oasis, even in the middle of
it
northern
is, and
Virginia.
it's at the time my old man was a Reagan appointee, so we were an oasis within the oasis, I guess.
So Ken,
back then, I went to school right near Falls Church, so I was going to school right near Haycock Elementary. So
nice, yeah. We probably competed in sports at some point or another.
Yeah,
nice.
Probably won.
No. I'm singularly awful at every kind of physical pursuit I've tried to do. It doesn't stop me from doing it. I just
I know about that. Yes.
Justin calls it sports ball and sometimes uses like 1890s terms about like sporting exhibitions.
I was involved in several sports positions. All right.
So thanks for joining us, Ken. I'm excited that we're overdressed. I have worked with Ken on a previous project. We kind of start each episode off, Ken, by demonstrating our swamp adjacentness or swampiness. I'll tell you, Justin can get a table at Le Diplomat anytime he wants.
Nice.
We've talked about our watches.
You will only to the kindness of others.
and a number of things. So Ken, you are, and we say this in a complimentary way, OG superpower swamp creature. And, we appreciate your insights. If I get it right when it comes to SEC regulation by enforcement, it's because I learned it from Ken. If I get it wrong, it's really not Ken's fault.
Because we didn't spend enough time together. Yes.
There you go. We flew on a private jet together once.
Too.
Yeah, it never happened again. And every time Ken flew after that for the company, his flight went wrong. We actually called it being Cuccinelli as a term of art. But for people watching, Ken has done a lot for the crypto community that you just don't really know about in advocating, litigating, and everything. So he really is someone who's done some amazing things. So we're excited to talk to him.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, we're probably going to double
I
the
wish
viewership.
we could talk about it like regular regulatory discussions. But it's not like that.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love regular regulatory discussions, by the way?
Right. Well, there are some of us who are pretty geeked out on that sort of thing, but this is not in that category. This is not in that category.
We do our best to keep it entertaining, which probably is why there's like 10 people that watch this. But having said all that, we were talking a little before we went on, and Hester Pierce is an SEC commissioner who's been very, very pro-crypto. And I don't think you'd quite call them opinions. I'm sure you can tell me the proper term. But when I read her dissents, she clearly went to the Antonin Scalia School of flourishing writing. They're often pretty entertaining. And, the recent case was about this Fly Fish Club. Basically, it was a supper club, and the NFT was an experience NFT, a utility NFT. And the SEC shot that down like it was Bernie Madoff running off with grandma's money. So, Ken, in general, what are your thoughts on SEC regulation by enforcement, and what do you think about them and these utility NFTs?
So, just so everybody knows what we mean by regulation by enforcement, usually agencies make rules that they have the statutory authority to make, and then they enforce them. Regulation by enforcement skips the step where rules are made, and they just go sue people. And that's what the SEC is doing. So if you're doing business in the crypto space, you don't really have any guidelines to look to know how to act and avoid being sued by the agency, in this case, the SEC. So that's what we mean by regulation by enforcement. It's bad for a number of reasons. One, we're a rule of law country, and what binds us together is supposed to be that we all play by the same rules. They govern us all the same way. But when you don't know what the rules are, and enforcement happens basically by the decision of the prosecutor, then people are selected, who knows why, and it can be for political reasons, it can be because they don't like the color green, it could be any reason at all, to go ahead and sue a particular participant in the industry while not suing other participants in the industry. And Chris and I, we've seen this quite a bit, and in some incredible instances with the SEC, some public companies who have had to file quarterly filings with the SEC and get those filings approved and so forth, have said they are doing certain things. And the SEC said, okay, check, thank you. And then a couple of years down the road, they sued other companies for doing those exact same things. So where's the guidance here? And that is somehow arbitrary, and this can be, and thus really tyrannical.
And so would you describe it, and I may be grossly oversimplifying it, but what strikes me is it's almost like ex post facto crimes. They come back after you talk to them and say, oh, now you committed something wrong, even though when we talked together, you agreed to stop doing it.
Yes. And, they've really devalued cooperating with the agency, by which I mean it's not really in your interest to cooperate with them at all because of their arbitrary and really rather vicious approach to the industry with this methodology of regulation by enforcement. One of the things that we've all understood or believed out in the industry is that true utility tokens, cryptocurrencies that serve purposes other than simply as a store of value like money, like Bitcoin is a store of value. But utility coins and tokens that perform other functions, because remember, this is all digital and it's all computer-based and cryptography protected, they can do other things other than just be worth a penny, to use US dollars. They can allow you access to events like the fly fishing NFT at issue, but it can be part of a reward system for energy saving. There are a whole lot of combinations. We're used to the most common one we all see, but it isn't in NFT form, is frequent flyer miles. It's just frequent flyer miles in digital form, to put a simple example in place. So the idea that the Howey test would ever cover these things is fanciful. But I will tell you, if you're a little business, and a little business can mean millions of revenue, but not a lot of margin, and the SEC comes to sue you, you're literally looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars of litigation costs, maybe millions, and that's not even counting what penalties might happen if you lose. And so a lot of folks settle. I mean, they're literally dealing with a bully. The government has a bottomless pocketbook and has no consequences for the individuals making the decisions. And that's a terrible arrangement, especially in a situation where they refuse to make rules and just jump straight to enforcement.
So I know you had a question, but let me get one more, Justin, in, and then maybe follow up. So the Howey test, landmark, a ruling, you kind of live and die by it. You want to maybe talk simply through that for people? Because you'd be amazed how many people in crypto, like with a blockchain, people doing mining, looking to get investors, don't know what the Howey test is.
So the Howey test is like so many other things in law, named after a guy who, in this case, lost a lawsuit. And he was selling investment contracts in an orange grove, literally growing oranges in Florida. And he didn't sell you a plot of land. He didn't sell you oranges. He sold you a share of the profits. And if the orange grove did well that year, you would get good profits. And if not, you wouldn't. And gave you a designated piece of the land, as I recall it. Nonetheless, that was pretty irrelevant to the transaction. And the court said, look, we're looking at the guts of the transaction, not the little mechanics that you set up. So if what you end up with is an investment contract that gives you rights to profits in the form of proportional ownership, that you don't have to do any work, the efforts of others is how it would be phrased in Howey. Through the efforts of others, you make money after your capital investment. That is a security. And the Howey test walks through each of those elements. And if they're all present, then you have a security, whether it's a stock, which is what we all know are securities. But here, an investment contract in part of an orange grove were securities. And the SEC is trying to argue that more and more and more cryptocurrencies are in fact securities. And I would say that they are when companies just go sell coins to raise money and say, if we make it, your coin will be worth something. Well, then you're investing in a company. You're not buying a cryptocurrency. You're not in a security arrangement if you're buying Bitcoin in the same way you might buy a euro, because you want to buy another currency. And Bitcoin has been recognized by the SEC as not being a security, for example, for that very reason. Now, had they been paying more attention under the Biden administration mentality 10 years ago, they might not have said that about Bitcoin. But Bitcoin got out of the crib without them killing it, and so did Ethereum. But most everything else, so far, they haven't cleared anything else as formally not being a security. And different companies do different things with their digital tokens. And the more things that your node, your mining machine does, the less likely you are to cross. By cross, I mean being the target of the Howey test. And the more things that your digital coin can be used for that aren't necessarily value related, what Chris and I were talking about earlier, utility, that the coin has utility of some kind, a use other than simply a store of value, then the less likely you are to be a security.
Yeah, I did have a question on it. In my funny little world, I was saying that uncertainty kills. It kills just about anything, right? People freak out about uncertainty. We know that economically, right? We know that on Wall Street. That's the old adage of, what really creates big problems on Wall Street is uncertainty, and that's really what they're introducing, right? The old saying of ignorance of the law is no excuse. It can't apply if the law doesn't exist, right? And
well,
then it's
Justin,
applied.
Some people have made due process counterclaims against the SEC, saying exactly that. Like, look, how can I know what the law is when you won't lay it out? And there's no statute they can point to. They say, sure there is. There's the Securities Act of 1933 and 1934. Well, it doesn't say anything about cryptocurrency. So, but so far, those arguments have failed.
Well, I'm wondering to what degree, because what the United States does has an impact globally, right? So to what degree is this impacting, or is it not at all, regulations around the world?
It's absolutely impacting them, and in exactly the worst way for those of us who are pro-America. And that is, we're chasing business out to more settled, certain regulatory environments like Switzerland and Dubai, just to name a couple. Because when you are out, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
Okay.
In America, they're out to get you. And if you're a business person with the capital and ability to go somewhere else and practice your worldwide business without being a target, you're likely going to do that.
Yeah, it seems to be a way to get rid of something that an administration doesn't like, or a regulatory body doesn't like, but is unwilling to pass the laws that specifically say we will not have this in the United States.
Justin, I think you're exactly 100% correct. And let's keep in mind what else we're chasing out of this country. This is a real unusual technological opportunity, meaning the use of blockchain, which is what cryptocurrencies run on, is they run on the blockchain. Blockchain is a very unique methodology that has lots of interesting and valuable applications that can help this country, can help free speech, can help healthcare. There are a lot of ways that blockchain can be implemented to be extremely helpful to lower costs. The financial sector hates crypto because the financial sector essentially is a middleman between investment opportunities and those with money. Well, blockchain allows trust directly without that middleman, which is what Visa is. When you swipe your Visa card, you're basically paying 3%. So the merchant can trust Visa and doesn't have to trust you that the money will get there. They provide the trust function. In blockchain technology, the encryption combined with the arrangements made on both sides allow us, not at the same speed, quite the same speed yet, to achieve that trust factor without a middleman. Well, just in the credit card space, that lowers your cost by almost 3%. That's a hell of a lot of money. That's a lot of money around the world. And so there are institutions that would just as soon see cryptocurrencies and blockchains die. But America's going to lose a technological cutting edge opportunity for a whole industry if we chase it out of this country, which we've been doing for 4 years under the current regime at the SEC.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. I mean, this is the sort of thing that affects on a large scale. I think people tend to view, I think most Americans tend to view crypto as a very narrow space.
Yes.
I mean, what is it? 7 or 8% of people hold it. So yeah, it's a small group of folks. And I think it is very easy to look at that and say, it's really just something that's in the speculative asset space, doesn't affect me in a meaningful way, right? And so who the hell cares what happens to it? But there's a lot riding on it. There's a tremendous amount riding on it, and it will impact people's ability to do well even in their private investments that are seemingly non-crypto related.
Well, and I'm a policy geek also, but to your point, I'll expand it even further. So let's say 8% of people have or hold crypto at some point. Far less of even them really focus on what does blockchain do for me? There are jobs being created, high-end, high-tech, very creative jobs being created, whole new industries being created based on blockchain right now. And they can be created here in the United States. They can be created in Switzerland. They can be created in Ukraine. That's happening. They can be created in Dubai. Do we want those jobs as an American? I want those jobs landing here. I want that creativity. I want that capital accumulation. I want that innovation to happen here. I want the rest of the world to benefit. But my country has led the way in those kinds of spaces for my entire life, and here we are chasing it out. I will say this. This SEC is chasing out those future potential innovations before they happen, so people don't know what didn't happen because of it, right? It's a lot easier for them to try to kill a lot of this now before we develop and apply things in ways that make people's lives cheaper, more efficient, happier, and raise their standard of living.
So two things. One, real quick, because we use two different numbers when we talk about ownership of crypto. Apparently, up to 18% of Americans have owned crypto at some time.
Okay.
And Justin went through some reporting. I forget who it was, Consensus. Somebody paid for some polling, and buried in there, Justin noted that 7 to 8% of people who owned crypto at some point, or of that 18%, right, about half, 7 to 8%, currently own it. So people who, are hearing us use two different numbers. The accurate one right now is 7 to 8%. And we've talked about, just how much that will or won't matter in a swing state. But having said that, this is for Bitcoin miners, because I have, having completed compliance training, been in presentations at conferences and things, and just my jaws dropped at some of the statements. And actually, Ken, interestingly, I talked to someone about what I'm about to map out for you, and he said, "Oh no, the SEC looked at my books and they're fine with it." I think maybe
they are today.
Yeah, well, I got to hit him up again. I think perhaps what happened is maybe he's a licensed broker or something, so he's perhaps selling the security. But let me walk you through this, because I think this is so important for people who want to get into Bitcoin mining and are trying to raise, and I say this if it's small, but a couple $1 million to have like a couple megawatts or something. What they do is they say, listen, I want to come, particularly when they're converting natural gas to electricity, because there's a lot of efficiencies there, or they get flare gas. Yeah. They say, look, give me the gas, and then I am going to pay you in Bitcoin. And here is the likely, they kind of use that Bitcoin power law, but they say, here's where I project Bitcoin to me. Now, you are literally the lawyer here, but that sure sounds like I just bought an orchard, and you just sectioned off part of the orchard, and you said you have a reasonable expectation of profit if you invest in my orchard, AKA my rack space in my Bitcoin mine. Is there a way this
public companies do exactly what you just described, and none of them have been prosecuted yet?
So, yet.
I was very careful to include that word, because other people have been prosecuted for doing just that.
So, outside of someone showing up one day and telling me I've done it wrong, if I came to you and said, we're going to name this after you, and you're the one solely responsible. Okay. Signaling never. Okay. So great. So now let me give you a second scenario with two different variations on it. So I'd be curious what you think of this. So something that's starting to show some promise is, tokenization of real world assets.
Yeah.
And BlackRock loves it. In fact, I don't know if you saw, there was a talk the other day. Whoever heads up like tokenization of BlackRock was out speaking and said that to BlackRock, that is their main. The ETFs, great, but tokenization is on the Ethereum blockchain is their real expectation of where they're going to make profit. But let's say I tokenize my hash rate. Now, I could tokenize the miners themselves. I could tokenize the hash rate. I mean, there's different ways to do it. And but if I tokenize the hash rate and sell it, do I have the same problem? And let me give you the A and the B. Do I have the problem if I do not sell it as a licensed security? And then if I do sell it as a licensed security, how many years, if ever, do you think it will take the SEC to approve it? And I get you, I'm totally asking you to speculate here, but.
Yeah, on the second one, I don't, one of the problems with the SEC's approach is they don't seem to really understand the arena in the first place. There's nothing more dangerous than undereducated people with lots of power, particularly when they have great pride and they really believe they're right all the time. That is really, really dangerous. And that is a lot of what we're dealing with at the SEC. You saw the Utah office get shut down after, some of their attorneys not lying people were lying to the court. And they didn't need to. They didn't seem to understand that the case they had was actually quite a strong case against DebtBox, and they didn't need to lie about it. But they weren't very competent about it. And I'm seeing that in several places.
I'll stop you just because you'll find this so amusing. Did you initially, when the judge came back and hammered those two prosecutors, did you see the remedial action? They said that they were going to have like an all halt, a mission halt, and they were going to do training. And the only training you could do is don't lie training. And I thought, I'm sorry, you have to train your people not to lie. Like
if you
from the messaging side,
have to train people not to lie, you have hired the wrong people. That is a hiring problem, and it should be a firing offense, particularly in any government institution with prosecutorial authority, whether it's civil or criminal. These people hold a lot of power over us. And, this is one of the problems, to jump subjects, with the last 10 years of the FBI. Since 9/11, they've converted themselves into an intelligence organization instead of a law enforcement organization. Law enforcement organizations live and die by truth. Intelligence organizations don't. And the FBI has faded farther and farther from its commitment to the truth over the years. And the SEC in this crypto space seems willing to sacrifice truth. And they just don't know as much as they think they do about the mechanics of how this works. A utility token. If I sat down and I could have the better part of a day to explain that to a lawyer, I'm confident that I could get them to a basic understanding level. I would rather it be a lawyer with an engineering degree. Not that I'm biased about those things, but I have an engineering degree for those who.
Yeah, from a university that we joke probably disowned him.
Oh, for sure. Well, that was because I was their lawyer when I was attorney general. But
I have to ask this, Ken. Ken went to the University of Virginia. Who do you think they hate more at the University of Virginia, you or Thomas Jefferson?
Well, for years it would have been me. I think a lot of them can't stand to hate Thomas Jefferson too much, so it's probably still me. But Thomas Jefferson with the DEI insanity, some parts of UVA actually fight against that. UVA actually does pretty well on the free speech scores, which I take as a bit of a proxy for not totally dumping on founding fathers like their own. Thomas Jefferson, of course, founding the university in 1819. So probably still me.
Okay, fair enough. I love, by the way, that as much as.
But I've never owned slaves.
Noted. I've always found it funny that no one wants to change the name of Stanford, and he was a pretty bad guy. Why don't they call that the California School for Equality? It doesn't sound as good, does it?
No, it also doesn't really match their admissions policies. Yeah.
I do want to get back, and I think Justin has another question, just to answer the second half of that. Good luck getting your SEC registration in. In terms of selling it as a token and you're unlicensed, and arguing that it's, say, something like utility token. Again, the Ken Cuccinelli mining company. Are you going to say absolutely not? Or are you willing to potentially take that on?
Yeah, if what I'm doing is tokenizing, we'll just call it a data center full of miners, and you get a statistical share of it, yeah, that's a security. I would not go there. If I own the equipment, I buy the equipment from you, and I literally handle the equipment. Maybe I want to keep it in the warehouse because I can get support in other things that are cheaper. But unless for instance, if I'm handling the software, okay, I'm out of security land. If I've got it in my house, you go back 10 years of Bitcoin mining, you're not going to keep a miner in your house anymore since they use about as much electricity as the average home, like the entire home.
Yeah.
And they generate the equivalent amount of heat that, you've got to have some deviation from simply owning a proportion of the mining capacity to really avoid being a security.
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to add to that, and I have some very minor political things afterwards if we have time to just ask, because we're political animals as well, is that we talk about on the show a lot that it's worth asking people why, right? In the media, and I think in just, most environments, there tends to be a dismissal of things like conspiracy theories and folks who are disgruntled with the government. Well, those people are crazy. It behooves us to ask why, right? And things like this, the full weight and power of government, whether it's state or federal, is awesome. It cannot be effectively fought by a man or even a company. Right? There is no billionaire capable of fighting it in an equitable fashion, to use a term. The tables are lopsided walking in. And you had mentioned this earlier, that this is why it takes an extraordinary amount of moral curatorship for an effective government. And absent that, the problem with this is it's not that they will win a victory and maybe that'll be Pyrrhic and they'll look back and say, gosh, I wish we weren't on that side. The problem is larger than that. The problem is it feeds into this ever burgeoning distrust in government that Americans hold and that we see over and over.
It legitimizes it.
It legitimizes it. Exactly. That's where this stuff comes from.
Yeah.
And it's underlined by a deep sense of unfairness.
Rumors don't get believed because there's literally not a truth in them. Rumors get believed because there is a trace of truth in them.
Exactly. It's a very long tail and has serious consequences. So these things they're beyond investment, beyond entrepreneurship, beyond economic items. They're big. They're big for America. I did have a question. I know we're running long. I want to be respectful of your time. You ran for governor, and in the world of polling, this happens a lot. But you had access to other polls than the public polls. If I remember correctly, as going up to the election, there was a larger delta on behalf of McAuliffe than there actually ended up being in the election itself. The results were much tighter than the public polling showed. You, of course, had access to private polling, which is a totally different animal than public polling. I wanted to know, did you see that fabric of the race change, and did you have eyes on that in a more accurate way than the public polling saw?
So, yes, but just to put people in context, this was 2013. It was when Election Day was Election Day, and everybody voted on Election Day. Of course, we had absentee voting for people who couldn't make that, but people were voting on, I forget, it was November 3rd, I think. And in 2013, on October 1st, Obamacare went into force. I was the first attorney general to sue on Obamacare. I actually had it declared unconstitutional. I was the first one to succeed in that, but it went awry in the Fourth Circuit. The Florida case ended up going up to the Supreme Court. But here comes Obamacare on October 1st, and there was a government shutdown over it, led primarily by Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, both of whom I like and support. But Republicans always get blamed for government shutdowns.
It's a poor political move.
If that's the purpose. But for them, it was an odd year. It wasn't a big deal. But it definitely affected me. That went till the middle of October. By the time the shutdown was over, we were behind between 5 and 10 points. Now, publicly, there were polls that showed me behind over 15 in some places, although also single-digit polls. But like you said, they're all over the map, right? But the turnaround was extraordinary. I mean, we were charging back at like half a point to a point a day. And so the change was so fast that we couldn't accurately track it. Neither McAuliffe, who was my opponent, nor I, going into Election Day, really confidently knew who was going to win. And as you know, Justin, there are days you go into Election Day, you know who's going to win. And that's a lot easier, by the way, when election day is one day and not 45 days, which is what we have in Virginia now. So we really didn't know. He didn't know. And it ended up being a 2-point race in a 3-way contest, 47-45, with the Libertarian pulling about 6.5 points. That didn't help me any. But that's all right. God's got a plan, and it wasn't for me to be governor of Virginia. So that's all right. But it was really unusual in how fast the numbers were changing, both negatively and positively, because of the outside environment that had nothing to do with the race. Ironically, McAuliffe was saying, I won't sign a budget that doesn't have Medicaid expansion, a big state feature of Obamacare. Well, that's a government shutdown in a state budget. If you won't sign the budget, there's no budget. That's a government shutdown. And he didn't get punished for it.
By the way, Ken, God didn't plan for Justin or I to be governor of Virginia either, but you had a pretty solid go at it, a lot better than him or me. So
that's all right. I mean, if I don't lose that race, I probably don't end up going into the Department of Homeland Security. And so I wouldn't have gotten this awesome cup. So,
Yeah, and I had great experience working for USCIS.
And that's where I went in as the head USCIS, which most people haven't heard of. So for your listeners, it's the legal immigration agency.
I like to say
than CBP.
I like to say they're in the business of creating citizens, not enforcing other laws. But I would have just missed you. They were a little overconfident. I was invited to brief on the metrics I had built at the White House. I think Jeffrey Zients was the tech task force head of this. He was really into it. But I was supposed to go in November 17th. So little scheduling issue.
Yeah,
they weren't there.
No, they weren't. But that was it. I'll tell you what, for the natural Americans watching, find a naturalization ceremony and just attend one. It's very moving. It reminds you of how blessed you are. You won the human lottery. You got a 1 in 20 ticket to be born in this country, greatest country in the world, despite the SEC, and a number of other things. So it's a real blessing.
And I'll add,
I love swearing people in who played by the rules. It was moving every time.
That's awesome. And I'll add, the other thing people don't realize is 1% of USCIS funding is taxpayer dollars. It's funded for
6% paid for by people going through the immigration process.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's extraordinary to see those ceremonies. If people haven't done it, you got to do it.
And they happen all over the place. We have over 80 offices all across the country, and the ceremonies go on everywhere. They aren't just at USCIS offices. So
yeah, I got invited to the one. I was a special guest. That's what I got instead of going to the White House to brief. The one they do in front of the World War II Memorial, and I think it was like Krulak. It was a 3-star Marine general that did the swearing in. It was really cool.
Hoorah! There you go.
He saw I wore my combat action badge, which, by the way, when Justin looked at my lapel one time, it was left on because if I'm in Texas, I wear it, and he goes, "Oh, is that like the DYOR lapel?"
I knew. That's a fussy.
I never think
this for you're rocking either DYOR or Chanel. You got on your lapel there. That's brave. That takes courage.
He was French, great straight man.
Bold.
I was like, it's got a wreath and a knife and a hand grenade. The Marine general saw that. It was interesting. I think it was Krulak, but he was so excited because he asked me kind of what I had done, and I explained, and then he asked what units I was in. I was in the Big Red 1 and 2nd Infantry Division, and he knew those units obviously. But he was genuinely excited to see someone out of uniform in the least prestigious but prestigious row. It was very interesting. He was really excited to see some door kicker that had made good, so to speak. That always struck me about that. But good dude.
Well, and people have their ideas about Marines, but You don't get to 3-star without, frankly, being a historian on top of a whole lot of other things in the Marine Corps. So they know their stuff.
And by the way, not at all to counter what you said, but this famous line that people think the Romans said actually was a Marine general in the 1980s. He said, "Amateurs study history and professionals study logistics." That was actually a Marine general. That's like attributed to all sorts of. But yeah,
back in Persian Gulf, the 1st Marine Division was spread across 200 miles of desert, and that's before everything kicked off. But the logistics of that are really something. The engineering officer for the division was a client of mine, so I learned an awful lot about it. So,
well, at least it wasn't a pilot. You'd have to hear even more.
No.
Awesome. Well, did you have any final questions or comments, Justin? I think we're up against time.
Ken, it's just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking your time to talk with us.
My pleasure, guys. Good to talk to you. Keep it up. Say hi to the cat, Chris.
I will.
And that's all for this week on the Crypto Swamp Creatures.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of crypto, politics, and policy.
Remember, the data doesn't lie, and neither do we. Well, not about anything important anyways.
Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay out of the swamp.